Well, so today we are going to discuss about rise of Marathas, causes behind the rise of Marathas. The Marathas, they have become important political force in the 17th century and they dominated 18th century during Peshwa's period. They dominated the whole political scenario of India for a very considerable time, almost 50, 60 years. And it's interesting to understand what were the causes behind their rise. And the causes we are categorizing into the different category: geographical, political, social, and religious causes. In case of geographical, we see that the geographical feature of Maharashtra is typically mountainous, especially the western Maharashtra, where Chhatrapati Shivaji has started his experiment of establishing an independent kingdom. That is quite a mountainous region, and the people who are usually brought up and spend their childhood in the difficult terrain, usually they are very sturdy and they are exposed to hardship since beginning. So that became working hard for survival becomes a part of their personality, and that is one of the characteristics of the Marathas that we find. And that is the reason when they started protecting their independence and fighting wars, the sturdiness, the hardship, they are used to it, and that were later on useful during the time of the war. And this mountainous region has helped in a numerous way to first to mold the character of the Marathas as they become very sturdy and had a spirit to fight, put up with difficulties. Secondly, in the mountainous terrain, it's very difficult to march with a huge army with all elephants and horses and cannons. So, though the central authority of the Sultanate, the Sultans of Deccan, Bahamanis, and then later on Bahamani, they got fragmented into the different empire like Adil Shahi and Nizam Shahi. So all these people, though they had a kind of a political hegemony, political control over the land of Maharashtra, but it was never very thoroughly established as it could be done by the Mughal in northern India. Any revolt can be stamped out because North India is quite a plain area and huge army from Delhi can march very easily up to Bengal for a distance. But it is very difficult to march into the terrain of Maharashtra, into the depth of the Maharashtra with a huge army. And that is the reason the control of the center authority had been a very loose kind of control. All those power, all those sultan, they ruled over the land of Maharashtra with the help of the local zamindars, with the help of the local Maratha nobility. And in that way, the spirit of independence was never crushed. And whenever they found a chance, and the leader like Chhatrapati Shivaji, that spirit of independence, it has risen like phoenix. It has risen from the ashes, and we see the Marathas. They not only established an independent kingdom, but they became a very important, very strong political power later on. Then the fort which can be built on this mountain, on these hills, was also one of the important reasons that have contributed to the growth of the Maratha as a political power. Because the fort that is built on the hill is having an advantage, tactical advantage over the army which is marching to conquer it. With the fort that is on the high hill, and if it is rationed for a longer period, with a very few people, you can hold on against the huge army that is trying to conquer you, because it's very easy. It's relatively not very easy, but it is relatively easy to hit the person from the top than you firing a missile or firing an arrow from the bottom, because you have to work against the gravitational pull, and the person who is always sitting on the top can have a clear view, better view, and can aim at you, and throw stones or throw weapons and have a better aim, because his throw is assisted by the gravitational pull. So this fort has proved to be very effective defense system, and that has contributed significantly to protect the Marathas from being encroached upon. Then by using this fort and narrow passes and the mountainous region, the Marathas have developed a very effective tactics of guerrilla warfare. Ganimikawa, as they call it in Marathi, where you let the enemy come in your territory, and then you suddenly attack, and then you vanish in the mountainous terrain, and the enemy being burdened with heavy luggage and all those animals like elephant and horses, and not familiar with the terrain, it become very difficult for the enemy to chase the Marathas. That is the reason we find that the very early effective force that Chhatrapati Shivaji has used against Adil Shah were mostly comprised of infantry, because the horse, for a horse to climb over a small hill, it's pretty difficult. Horse can move very swiftly, no doubt about it, but the infantry, the people who are walking on the foot, they will suddenly descend, they will hide in a hill, they will suddenly descend on the marching army, cut the people, slash here and there, and then they will just vanish. And with the horse again chasing them, it becomes very difficult for the enemy. So that is a very, guerrilla warfare is a very effective weapon that is used by the Marathas with the help of the geographical region to fight against the enemy, and to protect their independence. As I already told you, the spirit of independence was always alive in the Marathas, because they were never properly subjugated by the central authority. The central authority had to always take help of the local Marathas to rule. Then the rivers in Maharashtra, they are not perennial, they are seasonal. Perennial means the river that flow throughout the year, like Ganga and Yamuna, because they are being fed not only by the rainwater but also by the melting snow from the Himalayas. But in case of Maharashtra, the river, they are in flood during the season. If there is a heavy rain, suddenly the flood will come, and you never know, because the river is coming from far up distance. If there is a rainfall at those places, and you will never know probably that the river is, the flood is coming. And that is what happened in few cases with Aurangzeb. When Aurangzeb invaded Maharashtra with a huge army, at one of the place, his camp, which was put in the on the bank of the river, that got suddenly flooded, and he in order to escape that flood, he fell and he injured himself, and later on he was limping. So this river and the sudden flooding, it also made it difficult for the huge army to march and cross, because where to put your tent, and in case, generally it is a mountainous region, but on the river bank you have a plain land. But if you put your tent there, put your camp there, it's quite possible that there might be sudden flood and your camp itself will be washed away. So all that kind of difficulties were there, and this has in fact made the Marathas to experiment effectively and successfully with establishing their own kingdom and rise as an important political force. Well, there are certain political reason. Delhi Sultanate was established at the end of the 12th century, and we see that the main recruiting ground to run the administration or to fight the war used to be Central Asia. Like, the people used to come to Delhi Sultanate from Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Arabia to seek employment. And these people who came from outside, who used to be belonging to the religion of the Sultan, that is Islam, they were highly, they were welcome, and they were given high post over that of the native population. But in case of Maharashtra and southern India, we see that this is geographically far away from Central Asia, and it becomes much more difficult for the person of a Central Asia to march such a huge distance and then cross the Indian mainland like Punjab and present day Uttar Pradesh, and then Madhya Pradesh, and then reach to Maharashtra. Some of them did reach, no doubt about it, but their number in comparison to the people coming to the court of Sultan is much on the lesser side. Now, the Sultan, as he was away, the Deccani Sultan like Nizam Shah and Adil Shah and Qutub Shah, they were far away from the main recruiting ground of the Islamic armies of Central Asia. So what they tried to do is that they tried to recruit the local population, they in protecting their political interest. Similarly, in South Indian, the Sultanate, like Bahamanis, we find there is a conflict between Deccani and Pardesi. So who are these Deccani and Pardesi? Pardesi used to be the Muslims who came from outside very recently, like who came from Persia, who came from Iran or Iraq or Arab, or Turk. And Deccani used to be the people who came to Deccan part of India quite long. They married with the local women, and during their stay their complexion have undergone a lot of changes. The people who used to come very recently from those Central Asian country used to generally have a fair skin, and the people who stayed here, their complexion had undergone a lot of changes because of the heat here. They become a little bit dusky. At the same time, there was an intermingling of blood as they married local women, and their progenies carried the characteristics of certain Deccani and certain Central Asian characteristics. At the same time, those people, Indian people who stayed in South India, who were Hindus or non-Muslim earlier, and they converted to Islam, those were also categorized under, in the category of Deccani. So this Deccani and Paradesi conflict had given opportunity for the local population to get involved into politics, to get trained into military tactics, and to join any of the party which benefited them. And in the Deccani, interesting thing is that Abyssinian, Hafshis, which are pronounced as Hafshis, Abyssinian, they actually came from outside, but they were very dark skinned and they were looked down upon by these Paradesi people, the Iranian and Iraqi and Turkey. They did not intermingle with this Hafsi. So this Hafsi, though militarily very strong, they became over a period of time. They also joined hands with Deccani. So we find that kind of conflict in the Deccani Sultanate, Deccani on the one side and Pardesi on the other side, and that conflict had given an opportunity for the Marathas to join hands with any of the party which gave them political benefits. Like in case in the battle of Bhatwadi, which was fought in 1624, Malik Ambar was one of the Abyssinian noble of Nizam Shahi, and this Nizam Shahi noble, with the help of Shahaji Bhosle, Shivaji's father, he defeats the combined army of Bijapur, Adil Shahi, and Mughal. Bijapur, Adil Shahi, and Mughal, they joined hands to finish off Nizam Shahi, but Malik Ambar and Shahaji, they successfully fought and they successfully defended. Similarly, we see that large number of Maratha family are rising to the very prominent position, like Jadhav, Bhosle, More, Ghurpade. And this in a way has given training to the Marathas to fight, to lead, and to participate in the politics. Similarly, Marathas, they had a memory of Vijayanagara, though the Vijayanagara Empire was over during the period of Alauddin Khilji, and that was long back. But nevertheless, we always live in the past to some extent. We always take pride in the work and achievement of our ancestors. And that is what we see, that the Marathas, they always were conscious that in Maharashtra there was a very prosperous kingdom of Yadavas, and they always aspired that if that past can be revived and if we can be independent, throw off this yoke of the sultans of Deccan. Similarly, very close to Maharashtra, there was an empire, Vijayanagara Empire, which was later on destroyed by this sultan, Nizam Shahi, and Adil Shahi, Qutub Shahi, all they came together, and the Vijayanagara Empire was badly defeated, and the capital was vandalized. So, though Vijayanagara was defeated, the achievements of Vijayanagara, the king like Krishnadev Raya, they had a phenomenal achievement. They defeated this Deccani Sultanate number of times. They expanded empire in all directions. So the memory of that empire also was a source of inspiration to the Marathas, apart from this Yadava kingdom. Then religious work of Bhakti Sant have also played an important role in the rise of the Marathas. Maharashtra is having a series of Bhakti Sant starting from 12th, 13th century to till up to 17th, 18th century, from Ganeshwara to Ramadasa. And this Sant, they preach in the vernacular language, that is Marathi. They took pride in Marathi language. They took pride in Hinduism, and this combination of pride in Marathi and as well as Hindu tradition, Hindu word has become, uh, you know, uh, become to it was used more very recently during the British period. During those time, Hindu word was not used that extensively by this son. They used the term called Maharashtra Dharma, which took pride in being a Marathi one for as well as being belonging to the tradition of Sanatan Dharma. And they have done a very important work of keeping this pride alive, even though the sultans were of different religion, Islamic religion, and barring certain exceptions, they were generally discriminatory against the Hindus and favoring to the more favorable to the Islam. There are certain exceptions. There are of course certain Adil Shahi Sultan who used to have a lot of reverence for the Hindu sant like Narsingha Saraswati. But in generally speaking, during the Islamic kingdoms, there was general discrimination against the Hindus. But it was this Sant who has kept the pride of being Marathi as well as the pride of being Hindu alive. And we see the discrimination in the personality of in the life of Eknatha. You know, Eknatha was a very important Sant at Paitan, but there is a story in his life that when he was coming from Bath from Godavari, a fakir he spat on him, and Eknatha has to go back again and take a bath. And when he was coming back, the fakir spat on him once again, and the Eknatha has went back number of times. So we see the kind of humiliation and discrimination that the even the respectable sant like Eknatha was subjected to. So you can understand what was the condition of the common people. Well, and in this sant, there is a very important sant called Ramadasa, and he gives the dream of Anandavan Bhuvana. Through his writing, he urged the Marathas, Hindus, to come together and to establish the kingdom where Hinduism can be practiced freely. So, you know, they instilled the idea, they have shown the dream of Anandavan Bhuvana. Anandavan Bhuvana is an imaginary place that Ramdasa imagines in his mind, in his poem, and says that in Anandavan Bhuvana, there is enough freedom to go for bath in the Ganga. There is enough freedom to practice your own religion. And in Anandavan Bhuvana, he imagines that Aurangzeb is vanished. In fact, you know, Aurangzeb has vanished much after Ramdasa. Ramdasa dies in 1881. And Aurangzeb dies nearly 26 years after him, 1707. But that dream that the Marathas can unite together, the Marathas can finish off Aurangzeb, who is discriminating against them, who is troubling them just because they are Hindu, the dream these Maratha sons have tried to put in front of the people and in a way contributed to the growth of that identity, growth of that self-respect among the Marathas, and in a way have significantly contributed to the rise of the Marathas as a political power. These sons also preach that it's not right to serve under the Yavana king. You know, the people, Yavana was the word which was earlier used for the Greek people, but during the medieval period, it was increasingly used for the Turk and Muslims who came from outside. So it's not right for the Hindu to serve under the Yavana king, and then if not under them, then we should have your own kingdom. So in a way, they have kept the dream of freedom for the Hindus alive. Then social causes. You know, in the northern India, generally we find that the caste system is much more discriminatory than what it was in the Maharashtra. So Maharashtra, in comparison, caste system was there, discrimination was there, and it became more stronger, more discriminatory during Peshwa's period because as the ruler were Brahmin, and the Brahmins took advantage of that situation. But during Shivaji's period or during preceding Shivaji's period, we find that there is a relative liberal background, and that is the reason we find that untouchable like Chokhamela could compose a devotional poetry. He had to do the work assigned to his Varna, no doubt about it, which was definitely an injustice. But he could join with the Warkari He could go to Pandharpur, compose a song, and his songs are written down by a Brahmin called Ananta Bhatt. So, can we just blame all the Brahmins? Definitely. That idea that somebody is inferior or superior just because of his birth is a very discriminatory, very unjustified idea. But at the same time, we have evidences like Ananta Bhatt, who seems to be an example of the ideas which refuses this discrimination to certain extent, if not 100%, and he volunteers to write down the songs that is composed by one untouchable. So, these Warkaris, they have played a very important role in reducing the caste differences and instill the pride of being Warkari and Marathi and Hindu across the caste. That is the reason when the Marathas they started unifying, they have a people not only from the upper caste but from the lower caste as well. Like there were Brahmins, there were Marathas, there were Mahar, and there were someone like even Dhangar, like Mallara Holkar. There were Kunbis. All these people they took pride in calling themselves as Marathas and Warkari Sant. They have played a very important role. In when you go to the Yatra, the Ashadi Kartiki Purnima to Pandharpur with the Dindi, there is a tradition that the the Warkari, the person who go on pilgrimage to Pandharpur, they touches each other's feet, irrespective of caste, irrespective of gender, irrespective of age. I might be younger, but if I go for Wari, another Warkari will touch my feet and I will touch his feet. Now, this touching of feet symbolizes respect, irrespective of caste, and in a way, now if not 100%, definitely caste system it still exists. Definitely, it has reduced the caste differences to some extent. Sant poet we have coming from the different caste background. There is Tukarama who is from Kunbi, there is a Ganeshwara and Eknatha who are Brahmins, there is a Chokhamela who was Mahar, there is a Sauta who was Mari, cultivator. So this kind of background have facilitated the coming of Marathas together, cutting across the caste. Then apart from that, there is a work of Shahaji before Shivaji. Shahaji earlier he was working under Nizam Shah, and with the help he helped Malik Ambar to fight against Adil Shah and Mughal. But after that Nizam Shahi, even he experimented to keep Nizam Shahi alive. He became a kind of kingmaker, and a small Nizam Shah was made Nizam Shah ruler, and it was Shahaji who was virtually ruling. Then later on, when Nizam Shah was no more, he joined service with Adil Shah, and Adil Shah sent him to Deccan. And at Deccan, though he was fighting there as a Sardar of Adil Shah, he used to rule like a virtual ruler and have his independent court at Bangalore, Bengaluru as it was called, having the number of people in his court like a king. There were court chronicle, there were poet, there were he has his council of minister to assist him. So in a way, he has experimented, if not openly, but might be in a way, if not overtly, but covertly, maybe in a hidden way, he was ruling almost like a ruler, and that example was carried forward by Chhatrapati Shivaji, where without any fear, he declared himself as an independent ruler, coronated himself, and declared himself as Chhatrapati. Rise of Shivaji definitely is an important factor in the rise of the Marathas because all the geographical features were there. The Marathas participating in Adil Shahi and Nizam Shahi kingdom was there, in Qutub Shahi kingdom was there, but that does not give rise to the independent kingdom. But it was genius of Shivaji who understood, who gave very effective leadership, who was not only brave but clever too. That has contributed to the rise of the Marathas as an important political power. So here our this topic ends, rise of the Marathas, and in the next class we will be elaborating on the Maharashtra Dharma. Some certain dimension of Maharashtra Dharma I have already touched upon. What was Maharashtra Dharma? It was a kind of blending of pride of being Hindu as well as being a Maratha, and Sant have done a lot of work into it, but we will elaborate it further in the next class.